New EU sanctions are to be imposed on Belarus after a crisis on its border with Poland, which is also the EU's external frontier. Thousands of migrants from the Middle East and some from Afghanistan have made their way from Belarus to the Polish border and are now trapped there. Belarus's president, who has the support of Russia's Vladimir Putin, is accused of orchestrating the crisis by flying migrants in and pushing them towards the EU. He denies that. Our correspondent Steve Rosenberg has this eyewitness account from the Belarus side of the border.
In the migrant camp, word had got out. They'd been told this was the moment to make it into the EU. Everyone here wanted to believe it was going to happen. And the Belarusian soldiers didn't try to stop them. In their thousands, they streamed towards the border crossing that leads from Belarus to Poland. And the closer they came, the more urgent it got. The last fence on the Belarus side swept away.
So after a week in the camp, the migrants are now pouring through right up to the checkpoint with Poland. They're determined to be let through to the European Union.
Attention, attention.
But it was no entry.
If you don't follow
Polish police were out in force and standing firm.
All this baby crying for a milk, for a nappy. We don't have nothing. Please come and help these people, all guys.
The EU says Belarus is using migrants as a weapon against the West to pressure Europe, a form of hybrid warfare.
These people want a better life. They are desperate to get to the European Union, which is right here. But the EU says that these migrants are being used, exploited by Belarus to spark a humanitarian crisis on the EU's doorstep.
Back in the camp, we heard stories of how Belarusian soldiers had helped some migrants try to cross illegally into Poland.
In the night, they told us, you will go to Poland. They cut the fence. The Belarusian cut for us, and we ran. We ran a lot, and then we hide ourselves in the forest. They see us and return back to the site. It is like a football game. We are in the middle.
Many of these migrants from the Middle East say they're escaping conflict at home. They've paid thousands of dollars each to get here, but they're stuck. They say there's no way back, but for now, there's no way forward. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Belarus.
Any country in the EU is obligated to take a good chunk of refugees or face serious financial fines in thousands of dollars for every refugee they turn away. This gave illegal migrants an excuse to invade Polish borders in a way that mocked the generosity of Polish people to let migrants through their borders. So Poland decided to do something about their migration problem, and it worked. Here is how Poland won the immigration crisis that has left so many nations like the UK and the US on its knees.
This morning, a migrant and refugee caravan on the road on the edge of Europe. Hundreds of people in Belarus make their way to the border with Poland. Their ultimate destination, the Polish government has said thousands are now gathering close to the border post near Kusnica. A few hours later, with tensions mounting, migrants start collapsing small trees onto the fence. Others, surprisingly well equipped, start cutting the wire with bolt cutters. The Poles have deployed around 12,000 troops to patrol an exclusion zone that runs along the border area. Lithuania, to the north, has proposed a state of emergency and is also deploying extra soldiers to its border with Belarus. This is hybrid information warfare, the culmination of a Belarusian policy to weaponize migrant misery, to punish neighbouring countries supporting sanctions against the regime. Take this family, literally stuck between Belarusian forces in balaclavas pushing them one way and Polish soldiers on the other side of the fence trying to stop them. According to Belarusian opposition, as well as wanting to punish neighbouring countries and divide the EU, Lukashenko wants to distract
from the situation in Belarus, which still goes through unseen repressions. For 15 months already, Belarus lives through the crackdown, through violence, repression, lawlessness and impunity. And this crisis allows to distract the attention of the international community from that specific crisis.
And this is how Lukashenko is doing it.
We got an invitation like tourism for 7 days.
We recently spoke to a Yemeni refugee who'd made the journey through Belarus. He explained that as well as the regime facilitating tourist visas, Belarusian border guards escorted his group to an opening in the fence in the dead of night.
They lead us to another way. And they told us, make sure you don't come back.
Poland is in something of a bind here. It can't give in to pressure from Lukashenko and wants to flex its muscles when it comes to its hard line on immigration. At the same time, the country has obligations to treat people humanely, which could become more difficult. Tonight, for example, reports of gunshots on the Belarusian side. And now, a giant refugee camp forming on the border. In the last few months, 9 people have died in these forests, mainly from hypothermia. The only thing more unforgiving than the politics of immigration, the Belarusian winter.
Luckily for Poland, they were alive to the threat that illegal immigrants posed on their borders, and they were more than willing to protect their land from the would-be invaders. Poland understood that letting these people in would lead to many bad outcomes. That is why Poland pulled all the stops when they started implementing their anti-illegal immigrant policies. This would come in handy when Poland faced a serious crisis. Thousands of immigrants swarmed the borders, apparently instigated by the Belarusian government in an effort to overburden them with refugees, or so the Polish government claimed. It's a claim that holds a lot of water, considering the fact that Belarus did nothing to stop thousands of refugees from entering illegally into Poland.
Centres for foreigners are set up to receive more newcomers. How will this work, since the Migration Pact, although adopted, is not yet officially in force in Poland? And what is the difference between migrants who have crossed the border legally on a work visa from those who storm the border and try to sneak into Poland illegally? Today, I'm checking the Polonia Centre at Łuków in the Lublin region. Concerned residents are sounding the alarm about migrants brought into the village. I was planting cucumbers on Saturday and they threw things like bottles. They also throw other objects. Something heavy fell on the roof once. And who will repair the damage for me? My daughter and I are alone. My husband is dead. We checked. Refugees are indeed walking around Łuków. I was in Russia for 3 months. I came from Sudan to Russia, got a visa, continued by cab to Minsk, and then to the border with Poland. We drove for 8 hours. I will stay here, not leave. In Łuków alone, there are at least a dozen such people, illegal migrants arriving from Belarus. In recent days, more such information has appeared. On what basis are these people staying in Poland? These actions, which concern attacks on our border with Belarus, are not met with a proper response from the patrols and a police state policy towards what is happening in the east. But on the other hand, we are dealing with the utterly scandalous practices of the German authorities and the German police who, like smugglers, cross the border into Poland and drop off people who have illegally reached Germany. How is this possible? And why doesn't the Polish state protect Polish borders and therefore the safety of Poles? And finally, on what basis did Germany send us back another group of migrants? This was already defined by the Dublin Directive. As a rule, if a migrant from one EU country has arrived in another, he should be returned to the country where he asked for asylum. This has not been observed so far by the German authorities, who are already so determined to send some of these migrants back to Central European countries, bypassing this provision. The Migration Pact, although already adopted, will go into effect in 2 years. And this raises the risk that the number of migrants staying and being sent back to Poland from Western Europe will increase significantly. Radosław Sikorski warns, but against denouncing the Migration Pact. Meanwhile, Donald Tusk blames his predecessors for taking in hundreds of thousands of migrants. The main difference is that if foreigners came to Poland under the previous government, they came to work with an employment permit and an entry visa. The difference is that the migrants come and sit in, and the regular ones, they have visas for 3 years, which they use to and work, put money aside, send it home, or put money aside to build a house in Indonesia or the Philippines and come back. And the more valuable migrants, they usually leave, and the nomads stay. Poland, by the way, has taken in more than 1 million genuine refugees, namely Ukrainians fleeing war. Edyta Holdinska, TV Republica.
While Poland was trying to keep illegal migrants out of their country, they were also simultaneously trying to tackle the problem of the ones already in their country. This was as big a problem as they faced on the Belarus border, because these illegal entries caused a lot of problems for the Polish government, from public vandalism and even assaulting Polish citizens who were just going about their day. It's not like the Polish government needed any encouragement to round up all the people who came into their country illegally, but now they had no choice but to respond to these threats from inside and outside their borders.
Idiot, look, he's jumping, destroying things. This is not Paris nor Berlin. This is Warsaw. Dear God, what is this moron doing? Yes, a 26-year-old immigrant from Rwanda in the city centre, right next to a luxury car dealership, trashed a car at random. You have to call because now this one, and we don't know which one, will be next. The migrant attacked a man passing by on a scooter at one point. A security guard from a nearby car dealership then intervened. The aggressor was apprehended by police. In connection with the incident that occurred in the area of Gottsov, we would like to inform you that police officers only a dozen minutes after the report detained a 26-year-old Rwandan citizen. The man was presented with the charge of destruction of property. There will most likely be more situations like this. Statistics show that in countries that face a problem of illegal mass migration, the number of crimes, including violent or sexual crimes, is also on the rise. If we accept these economic social migrants in an uncontrolled way, this kind of behaviour will certainly accompany us permanently. As of 2026, according to the recently adopted Migration Pact, all European Union countries, including Poland, will have to accept migrants into their country or pay tens of thousands of euros for each person refused. Poland will be a beneficiary of the Migration Pact. We have managed to force these countries to sign an agreement in which they say they will either accept them, like France, Italy or Spain, or contribute financially to defend the external border. Up until now, Poland has been one of the few European Union countries to disagree with the open borders policy pushed by Germany, among others, since 2015. Even then, it was opposed by the Law and Justice government. At the time, I said, it is necessary to help, but on the spot in those countries where they live, while under no circumstances can we agree that they should come to Poland, that they should be forced on us. The question of migration policy also appeared on the referendum ballots last autumn, but most voters in the then opposition boycotted the referendum. I solemnly before you annul this referendum. Opening the borders to immigrants is also consistently called for by Szymon Hołownia. We need 1 million migrants in the labour market today so that our labour market doesn't collapse. The Migration Pact won't take effect until a year and a half from now, but as TV Republica revealed, local governments have already been ordered to look for accommodation for this purpose. I would like to ask you to identify places and facilities possible for the mass influx of foreigners to the territory of Poland, other than those covered by assistance under the Act of the 12th of March 2022 on assistance to citizens of Ukraine in connection with the armed conflict on the territory of that country. This is quite characteristic of Donald Tusk. He keeps deceiving the Polish public. He doesn't inform about what he is doing, and thanks to a TV station like Republica, we are able to learn something about what is happening in Poland. So instead of solving the problem, we are witnessing its escalation, and there is no indication that this will change in the near future. Konrad Wąż, TV Republica.
If you're familiar with any country's war on illegal migrants on any continent, then you will find out that one of the most effective ways to keep illegal migration in check is by building a solid, scary-looking border wall that inspires hopelessness in those who hope to cross the border illegally. The intimidating 186-kilometer border wall has proved an effective tool in keeping out illegal immigrants, and the Polish government also fancied the wall as a defense against Russia, which had just invaded Ukraine. It seems like the Polish have been thinking several steps ahead of these problems that have been thrown at their border. They not only managed to stem the flow of immigrants, but they also added a key defense against any future invading force, quite effectively killing 2 birds with 1 stone. No doubt folks from the UK can't fathom why their government is not doing half as much as the Polish.
Очень незначительная группа молодых людей.
The immigration stance Poland adopted was a firm one, if not a little harsh on the poor refugees, who were just seeking a place they can call home, even if it's only for a little while. But Poland made it clear that their land is not one they're just going to give out, especially when the migrants are used as pawns in a Cold War move from Belarus and Russia, who were key supporters of Belarus. The Polish came out in force to defend their border even before there was a wall put up to stop the refugees. The border police themselves stood as pseudo-walls that no migrant could get past. It's safe to say that what transpired between the Polish and the immigrants who sought entry by any means possible was ugly, to put it mildly. Poland used everything in their arsenal to defend their border, including water cannons and even tear gas.
The European Union is facing a major revolt from a number of member states, and surprise, surprise, it's about migration. Yesterday, the EU voted in favour of a new pact that means all 27 countries in the bloc must take their fair share of asylum seekers or face €20,000 fines for each migrant. But straight away, Poland and Hungary said they will not accept migrants from EU states. They dug in, and now they're on collision course with Brussels. And let's cross straight now to Brussels and speak with journalist and expert on the ground, Jack Parrott. Jack, we watched the votes here live on the show yesterday with huge fascination. It scrambled through, but within moments, Donald Tusk, of course, a former European Commission president himself, said no, they would not accept it. Quickly followed by Hungary. The EU is at a huge impasse. Will other nation states follow?
So he was a former European Council president, Donald Tusk, and he indeed, what's interesting about him is that he's super pro-EU as having taken that job. But even him as a Polish prime minister now, he's not really in the same political line with the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. But this issue is so contentious in countries like Poland and Hungary that you're right, they immediately came out and said that they wouldn't accept migrants under this system. Having said that, they have agreed to it within the sort of negotiations that got it all the way up until this point in the European Parliament. As you said, it was a knife-edge vote. It was so close, and they needed to approve all 10 pieces of legislation, a piece of legislation related to detention, for instance, another one related to the transfer of migrants, another one to set up a database. They were all interlinked, and they all needed to pass if the pact was going to be approved. Now, many of the MEPs that voted in favour of some parts voted against other parts, depending on their political leaning. It was extremely close. It was a good bit of political theatre, Martin, but most people, I think, that I spoke to that walked away from that vote, while they feel they got it over the line, many of them still aren't completely content with what this pact is going to mean. And as you say, a number of governments already saying they won't be involved and they won't approve certain aspects of it.
And Jack, many member states saying, why should we take allocations of asylum seekers to our country if the EU simply cannot control its seafaring borders? While, of course, Greece and Italy, who have been inundated with numbers, would like to see the numbers dissipated across the member state. The big question now, though, Jack, looking forward, of course, we're looking down the barrels of hugely significant European elections, EU elections coming up in June. We've already seen parties in France across the bloc saying they're going to make hay out of this issue. The Eurosceptic vote could surge as a consequence.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this, Martin, is that people that are sort of anti-immigration and want to prevent immigration into the European Union aren't really happy with the deal because it doesn't have too much in it about returns to country of origin. It does have quite stringent measures about detention on the EU's external borders. And so parties on the left that consider themselves more pro-human rights and want to take a slightly softer line, they're not very happy about that. Like I said, a lot of people that voted in favour of certain aspects of this deal aren't happy with it overall. The hard right and the hard left abstained on or voted against many of the aspects of the deal. There was quite an interesting moment during the votes, Martin, where a group of protesters stood up and said, vote no against this deal, kill the pact. This pact kills, I think, was their chance. chant, and the far left MEPs got up and congratulated them. It was a big sort of scene that happened, and they tried to charge through these votes to make sure they got before the vote, Martin, just as a bit of context to this, it was a number cruncher. It was like watching House of Cards or something. All of the different political factions were trying to find out whether each of the different angles would be able to get enough votes to get it over the line. It was exciting. The deal is now approved. Important to say that when it relates to the June elections, Martin, this pact won't actually come into enforcement until 2026. So while the people that have tried to push it over the line want it to be a vote swinger, nothing really changes before the elections.
But it will matter to those political parties who are saying we didn't vote for this as a nation. A few MEPs voted for it. They don't represent millions and millions of voters. And why should people in France accept the consequences of MEPs from all over the shop? And I think they will make hay over this. Marine Le Pen has already said that she will. And President Macron, we heard yesterday, was frantically ringing around to try and get Donald Tusk's MEPs to abstain to get this over the line. So clearly, this is a matter of huge significance within the political bloc.
It is exactly that, but it's politics, not the practical implementation of the changes of this deal. So all of the different political factions will try and sell it that they either won or they're fighting against this when it comes to June's elections. But voters aren't going to see changes in how the asylum process works yet, not until 2026.
But political parties will be able to say, unless you vote against the European Union, unless you vote Eurosceptics in like us, we won't be able to stop this, and it will come.
But the pact is already voted on now as far as the EU goes. So to have to try and overhaul it in the next elections would be really difficult. It's politics. This is it. You're right in some sense that they will try to say that if they're elected in, they'll be able to stop it. But the overwhelming numbers ahead of the EU elections is that the centrist bloc that got this over the line is likely to retain most of the majority in the elections. It's all to play for in June. We'll have to wait and see how that falls out.
Are you hearing, as we did, that Slovakia are eyeing what Poland and Hungary did? And you're right, it is politics, but posturing and playing tough against the EU lands well domestically, particularly when it's about political survival. Who would have thought that the rebel in the midst would be Donald Tusk?
Yeah, that's kind of the big surprise, and the other leaders have tried to get him on board. Like you say, there's grumblings in different countries. For instance, Czechia, for instance, Slovakia. The reason being with Poland as well is because this deal doesn't really, according to them, take into account the hundreds of thousands of millions of Ukrainians who've entered the European Union. But that's done on a different system. It's not international protection like someone from Afghanistan or Syria might look for. It's, as you know, Martin, extremely complex, and the politics gets played around it. The institutions of the European Union are saying, listen, this deal, though, does actually prevent us and give us much, much more ability to prevent people entering the European Union.
Poland has also had to fight this war on their border in the hallowed halls of the EU, which is the place where the decision on whether they will allow migrants into their country. It was no surprise that Poland led the revolt over illegal immigration. They were just not having it. Not after barely surviving several major immigration crises. Perhaps it was a little surprising that Hungary backed up Poland in this revolt, but if you knew their story with illegal immigration, then you wouldn't really blame them.